cast. So we will be spectating Widderson here. That is against SSP paired with Brad and Apfelskulli. So I'm not sure who that guy is, but let's see here. What they decide to do. We are the wave one. So what do we have here? Widderson having a nightmare start. Apfelskulli decide to go for a strange wild shroom start. To be honest, we do have king ups on everybody except Widderson. Uh, so it will be quite interesting, but there's already 3 units revealed for SSP to send on. But not, I mean, you do have a arcane defense thing for 3. Maybe that's a crusher later, and that should be a Sky Queen, so you do cover a lot of stuff with those 3 units. So it's just a question of how we develop that, but that's not a common start you see. On SSP, we have the Priestess. We do have the Green Devil start on Brad as well. Going to 5 Worker, having the tier 1 to go with it to prevent any leaks to a Snail on wave 2. I do believe this is a small leak. Depends on how much goes on the Bone Warrior. So we do have the Snail recent here from Apfelskulli. It does decide to go for a second Sky Queen here. So strange progression of a build here. We do have the Snail here from SSP, but that should be covered by Apfelskulli. It's all a question of how well the Green Devil does. Doesn't look too bad. Honestly, I think it was just enough time bought by this Bone Warrior to give a hold to the Green Devil. Let's see how Apfelskulli is doing. Very close here. It should be a 2 or 3 units, 3 units leak maybe. Eh, it's pretty close. It's a 3 unit leak. It's not the end of the world, and a 3 creeps leak also for the Green Devil. So similar on both ends. We do have 6 workers on Apfelskulli and 6 worker on Brad, but I much prefer to see the 6 worker on Brad than on Apfelskulli because he is susceptible to a 40 reset, no, only a 20 here, so he's lucky, only receiving a maximum of 20 Methium here. And so now, when you do such a push, you're kind of struggling a little bit on what to build, and you do see that into the Bone Warrior spam here on that side. So it will share the aggro with that positioning. It might help him hold wave 3, but it's not ideal for the development later on. But let's see, we do have a 60 here onto Widderson. He does have the Butcher, so that means he will be able to push to maybe 7 workers since he received 60 here. And this does look like a leak for the Harvey player as well, so Apfelskulli struggling the early game here, pushing too aggressively. But that will be covered in the middle by Wither. Still no sense onto SSP here. The long waves does not help. 44%, that's not the end of the world, to be honest. But that's a leak to only once now. And on the other side, Brad did manage to push to 6 workers without leaking anything. But he will receive now on wave 4 the double DT from Apfelskulli. So let's see how he answers to that. And Widderson will be in a position to hold quite easily here. So this leak is more time for the Sands, but this Sand needs to be impactful onto Brad. So let's see what he decides to do. So with that amount of gold, probably going for the Fire Archer. Sadly cannot go for a Warp, but maybe a Bone Warrior with a Buckler here, yeah. I think adding the Bone Warrior is not out of the question here. He does do so. So let's focus on that side. We do have the 40 sent on to Apfelskulli. Trying to leak him again. It might be working here because the front line is not that good here. But let's see here. Brad and SSP, how are they doing? It's a hardened Mudman here on SSP, so it should be able to hold quite easily. On the side of Brad, he did manage to get rid of those 2 DTs, but the leak is still quite massive because the DT did manage to reach the Fire Archer here. Positioning on the Bone Warrior, not ideal. If the Bone Warrior is on the side of the Green Devil, the 2 DTs goes on that side. Fire Archer tanks 3 units, survives that. So a better tank repartition if you do it like that. But no matter, it's still a small, it's still an acceptable league when you're playing that build here for Brad, able to push workers while Apfelskulli has been leaking 3 waves in a row right now. So in total, if we look at the gold, uh, it's pretty similar on Apfelskulli and Brad. So this means that the people that are, well, it's exactly similar, uh, but the gold gain from leaks is higher on Apfelskulli because he is the one who is the most behind. So he's benefiting more from the leaks of Brad. While in the early game, SSP and Brad were both and through a similar spot, Brad a bit ahead because of the 6 workers, so he received a bit less. But Brad can catch up with income, while Apfelskulli it will be struggling here. But does have the canopy, so this will allow him to push quite hard and be able to hold. But the canopy is full tanking, so I might be wrong here. So it will be interesting to see how it goes. Widderson does receive the imps here. It will result into a leak. The Harpy player will be leaking as well. The canopy not enough to fend off the sun of SSP because the canopy is full tanking, and normally when you play canopy you want a partial tanking with the canopy, so a bone crusher would have been a bit better here. Well, I just think, yeah, I mean, if he does bone crusher he cannot afford that, so it's hard to tell, but uh, no matter, canopy is better when it's not full tanking the wave, and if you don't have a decent tank to share the aggro with it, then you need to adjust the build, I believe. So king damage here onto Widderson and Apfelskulli. Will they be able to recover? So the key part of Apfelskulli to recover is to get that tank into the split. That's the most important part for him. He wants to share the aggro with the canopy. That's the most important thing. Now let's see. He got 73 gold, 80. Wait, he's going for another Dark Mage, so Canopy will tank everything again. The reason is coming from SSP. Does he go full? Doesn't look like a full send here. Will probably go only for the Lizard. Apfelskulli is saving onto Brad, but he will be leaking here, I presume. But here, we're just going for full income. All DTs with a Snell. So the canopy doing decently, but will now die here, leaving how many Rogos alive? 2? That might be still a hold here. It's not ideal, but it should still be a hold. And he's pushing to 9 workers because of that lizard. He's looking pretty strong on 7, but the same problem occurs again and again. He needs to share the aggro with another tank for that canopy to be effective. Apfelskulli going for brutes, SSP going for brutes, and Widderson going for income. So Apfelskulli trying to leak. Brad here on wave 7. Decent choice here, only having the Green Devil as a decent tank. No real damage behind it. And nowhere close to getting one. Maybe sell the Bone Warrior for Daphne. That could help him possibly a little bit. And that's exactly what he does. Relieving the pressure on the Fire Archer, I don't necessarily agree with that. Putting the Daphne behind would let at least the Fire Archer tank a little bit and use some of her regeneration. But decides against it. Daphne will tank before the Fire Archer. Not quite sure about the decision. So only 2 brutes here, not adding the Snail. So quite an interesting choice, going for the leak but not folding. The brute and the lizard should clear the canopy quite easily. And now it's a question of, is the harpy enough to clear all of the rest here? I do presume it will not be enough. And we do have SSP holding the snail here. And Brad not doing too bad here, but that's the same question we could ask ourselves. Is Daphne in the right position here? Could have that been a bit behind, having 1 sludge onto the fire archer? I mean, it could have been a bit better, but still a very decent job for Brad here. And Apfelskulli is struggling to maintain the pressure and able to hold, pushing to 11 workers here. Widderson playing a bit safer here, but that's because he's getting saved on 200 Mythium onto Brad to send on Widderson. I do hope he goes on wave 8 here, but let's see what they decide to do. I do think whether SSP should resend as well. He has the worker lead. but they do decide to skip it and go for wave 9 together, which I don't particularly like. But the send will still be massive. It's just getting the edge chef here just so massive with also the monuments. But okay, so Widderson needs to make a crucial decision here. What does he go for? Does he go Nightmare? Does he expect the send to be on 8? Or does he expect the send to be on wave 9? So he does say to himself, okay, my teammate is building for 8, he's trash on next wave, so he's gonna, oh no, he's going to Ardent both monuments, no. That's terrible, because now on wave 9, 9 seems so much like the best option, but to be honest with you, I do think it was the right decision from Winston to go for the Harden here. Look at his value, minus 130. So even though as an outside viewer, you're like, oh no, why does he do it? But when you look at his value, we can understand. It has been a long time since he received a send also. So Brad doing a huge control onto Widderson here, controlling the beast, keeping him down. And now we do need to expect a centaur here, I believe, to get rid of those nightmares. I do hope we see it. Because apart from the pierce damage of the nightmares, like the only threat should be the edge chef. So let's see what he decides to go for. He does still have time. And he decides to go for the centaur, so I really like this decision here. Because if he kills those nightmare, he doesn't have any damage left. And edge chef is going to, or is it? I mean, at this point, edge chef seems to be the better choice here if he wants to. Except if you expect the imps. If you expect the imps, it's not the right decision. So he does not expect that. He does expect something on the side of the imps and does go for hardened mundans instead of the edge chef here. So going for king ups here, income king ups, and 360 sand is just too massive for Widderson to hold. But he does bring the centaur onto the split, giving time to the nightmare to kill some of it. It's all a question of how well does Apfelskulli does. And with the canopies already dead, the ghost knight already still alive. And wait, Widderson doing very well here. And he is now sniping the centaur, but that's not what he wants to do because the two nightmares are now wasting a bit of its damage. But the centaur will survive and go through. And a lot going to king, and this should be enough to kill them. The centaur is a lot of DPS to the king. Ghost Knight will absorb a lot of damage as well, and a lot of carapace are still alive. So it does mean that we will have game for SSP and Brad. Very good control from Brad. While Apfelskulli did an interesting start, didn't work super well. But that's because he never shared the aggro between the canopy with another big tank on the other side. So that's the trick with canopy. You don't want them to full tank, or you don't want them to tank first. There's way more value in the canopy if it's used as a DPS because it can regenerate HP and thus still live a bit longer. Um, the longer it stays alive, the more value it has. But where the value is maximal is when it's tanking 1, 2, 3, 4 units in the late game and still surviving, out eating some of the damage, and thus enabling some of your other tanks to tank most of the wave. It's never made to be a full tank here, and that was a big problem. And another problem is showing so many units in the early game and leaking so much while over pushing, not realizing where the canopy, the washroom is strong or when it is weak. Um, so wave 2, a bit unlucky here, I believe, but still with that value, it's very hard to hold, especially with washroom. And wave 3 was just over greedy. Maybe without a send it holds, but it is super risky to go for it. So he did get Brad quite a lot in the early game here on wave 4, but this league was just perfect for him, giving him a long wave. on 7 workers, able to get the imps and the lizard onto Widderson. But that's where also blue Apfelskulli was overvalued, but this just show you that most of the value of the canopy is within its regeneration. If it doesn't live, then you're not really overvalued for that wave. So that's the main part. I mean, someone could say that Widderson was a bit greedy with the second nightmare here. Hardened Monument could have been better, but then you don't have a tier 1. But that's because he went for YOLO, so it was indeed the correct play to go for Nightmare to have the extra value. Was it in the right position? Maybe not. But that's really hard to tell. I never tried to go for a second Nightmare on wave 5. Uh, but that was the right call, expecting imps, not really wanting to go for Mudman because you cannot spend all of gold at that. So I think overall, Richardson did do pretty well considering his build, but the long waves here were not ideal for Richardson, especially after Scully leaking a lot of waves in the early game, 4 waves in a row, and then holding, but then leaking right away on 7, making the wave super long, also by resending onto Brad a lot of times. Wave 7, the wave 7 leak is on paper fine, but this just extend the waves. But you need to be holding if you're doing that kind of stuff. Uh, yes, you're leaking your guy, but did you overpush to do so? Is your guy saving on your ally? In what position are you? So that's the thing you need to keep in mind. Are you ahead? Are you behind? If you're leaking your guy and you're behind, then you will need to expect a bigger send at some point, and you need to be prepared for it. If you look at the values, Apfelskulli was 130 under, Widderson was 140, 50 under, but that's because he had that he hardened moments here. If I just want to make an assumption here, if he didn't Arden here, it was very close to be honest. More time could have been the difference maker, but still the centaur was massive and did a lot of job even though the madman was hardened. So I don't think Widderson could have been playing a bit better. And I don't think there was a better choice here. I think the hardened on 8 was the best choice he could made. Sending 8 against Nightmare is not unlikely. And also I feel Scully not looking the best on 8, even though he has double canopy. He doesn't have the damage to kill the wave. So I do believe it's the right assumption that he did. It turns out they didn't send, but that's it's always a coin flip at this point, right? So when it's a long save, you always need to take a guess and pick a wave. And if it's the wrong one, it's the wrong one. But you need to live with that. And to be fair, he held pretty well. He surprised me on how well he did against that centaur. But he did drag the centaur away from those nightmares, which helped him quite a lot. So on that, I'm gonna say that I hope you liked it, and see you next time.